Good morning once again, everyone. I'm very, very thankful that you all could join me. We left off in Exodus 18, where Jethro had just given really good counsel to Moses, and then he departs, leaves Zipporah and Moses' two sons with him in Rephidim. So let's recall this is where the first battle outside of Egypt took place. Was at Rephidim right there. We believe is the hill where Moses stood. They actually believe that this right here is a pretty good graphic depiction of the hill. It wasn't a mountain, but it was pretty close. He had to be pretty elevated in order to see everything that was going on. But before that, the battle had taken place. They were very thirsty. Right here is the rock that pretty much 99%. We're sure that this is the rock that was smitten. There's erosion marks around it. So it wasn't just that a large body of water come out of this enormous rock. It's an enormous boulder looking thing. But also it created some type of, in my estimation, like a small river of sorts, because these erosion marks are present there. And water has to settle for a while before it actually erode away at the surface beneath. In the third month, when the children of Israel were gone forth out of the land of Egypt, the same day came they into the wilderness of Sinai. So they've been wandering around for 3 months and finally wound up right where Moses was first told at the burning bush to go get them. For they were departed from Rephidim and were come to the desert of Sinai and had pitched in the wilderness, and there Israel camped before the mount. In Egypt today we have the Sinai Peninsula. But that is not where Mount Sinai is located. It's actually located in Saudi Arabia, right across from the Gulf of Aqaba and the Red Sea. And there is a little bit of debate about whether the mount itself is Jabal Alaz or Jabal Makla. And it really doesn't matter. It's all part of one big mountain range. It's all part of one. This article says something pretty interesting. One issue at first may confuse the reader as to which mountain is actually Sinai, Jabal Alaz or Jabal Makla. In his account of the history of the Jews, Josephus stated that Sinai was the highest peak in the region. Jabal Alaz is technically a taller peak than Makla, but Jabal Makla appears to be a more favorable candidate for being a single peak where this part of the Exodus story takes place. Rather than assigning each peak a name, the entire range may be named after the highest of the mountains, which in this case happen to be connected. We must also consider the fact that almost all of the other evidence that we examine, the possible golden calf site, Moses' altar, the marble sections, and the wells, is all concentrated closer to Jabal Makla than to Jabal Alaz. And in case you're wondering about why is Mount Sinai also called Mount Horeb, this actually gives a really good explanation for that, this very same article, just in closing. In the Bible as well, the author refers to the same mountain by two different names, Mount Sinai and Mount Horeb. The famed Jewish Bible commentator Abraham Ezra wrote during the Middle Ages that there was one mountain, but it had two tops, with each had different names. Protestant reformer John Calvin also suggested that this was one mountain, but that the eastern side of it was called Sinai and the western side called Horeb. That's the reason for the two names. It's a pretty good reason. In either case, whether it's Jabal Makla or Jabal Alaz, it doesn't, I don't think, really matter. The two mountains aren't very far apart. It's the same vicinity. But and Moses went up unto God, and the Lord called unto him out of the mountain, saying, Thus shalt thou say to the house of Jacob, and tell the children of Israel, Ye have seen what I did unto the Egyptians, and how I bare you on eagle's wings, and brought you unto myself. There is a a legend that goes around on how most birds will carry their young with their talons, and how the eagles, their young, will latch on to the back of their. as far as the, as far as what I looked up, my studies, I could not find where baby eagles actually, or eaglets actually did that. And this is a figurative way of saying I carried you along the entire way. There was an interesting thing that I found out about the young little eagles whenever they're first growing up, and I believe it's worth mentioning how whenever they are wanting their baby eagles to fly, eaglets, whatever, whenever they're wanting them to fly, to get out of the nest and try to fly, what the eagle will do is they'll go and place food for them away from them, like a short distance away on another branch or something. So that's really good reason for them to fly, and that they'll sit right there and wait for them until they get out and start. It's kind of like parents today. Well, if you want, you got to move out. But I just thought that was really interesting how God has set that up, and He used food once again to push them along, to get their attention, to make something happen, to force an action. And we see right here, perfect place for God to do this to the Israelites. Now therefore, if you will obey my voice indeed, and keep my covenant, then ye shall be a peculiar treasure unto me above all people, for all the earth is mine. If you'll notice, this is the tip of the mountain that we believe is the mountain. And once again, it's all one mountain, but there are a couple of different peaks. But notice how it's burnt. It's still burnt to this day. Here is a couple on top of the mountain of Jabal Makla, at least, September 24th, 1992. And as you'll see, this would have been the view that Moses would have had for 40 days. It's a pretty incredible view. Here is a a long distance shot of Jabal Makla. And this would have probably have been like the boundaries that were set for them. We'll come to this all, but as you see the burnt black top, it's still burnt. Upon examination of these rocks, they were astonished to find that the outside of these rocks were burnt, and that the inside was normal. Which leads many to say, well, it was burnt by some other kind of force other than volcanic. This article tells a little bit more about this darkness upon this mountain. The darkened rock also encircles the plain that is in front of the mountain, giving it an appearance that is similar to an arena. The rest of the mountain is brown and gray. The appearance of Jabal Makla's darkened top is visually stunning when it is viewed with the Exodus story in mind. The rocks at the top of the mountain are only black on the outside, the article says. The inside is a different color, making it tempting for believers in the Exodus story to envision the rocks as having been burnt. When broken, the inside of the rocks shows a reddish tan layer and a brown core that matches the rocks found on the rest of the mountain. It indicates that the rocks had a chemical interaction that only altered the outside and only occurred at the top of the peak. Dr. Charles Whitaker wrote a 2003 thesis which had this included in it. The fact remains that there are some questions about explaining the blacktop of Magla in completely natural terms. The fact of such isolated weathering on just one peak of the granite rocks fosters questions that may only be answered by an on-site analysis. However, it may be concluded that one might explain this feature as a natural phenomenon. Yet if one can demonstrate that the biblical scenario is possible from what can be viewed at the site, without disregarding geologic science, then a door stands open to regard the natural supernatural theories for this phenomenon. And ye shall be unto me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words which thou shalt speak unto the children of Israel. Now in the New Testament after Christ, we see how we become the kingdom of priests, and we become the holy nation. And Paul goes further and states that we are the true seed of Abraham in the spiritual sense. Because when Jesus come along, he points out it's far more than flesh and blood that we should be looking at. He says, look at the heart of men. Look at the spirit. Go deeper. And John the Baptist even said that. He said, God can turn these rocks into Jews. He said, it's nothing to be a Jew. Paul made it very, very clear. He said, now there's neither Jew nor Greek, bond nor free, male nor female. We're all one in Christ. And Moses came and called for the elders of the people and laid before their faces all these words which the Lord commanded him. And all the people answered together and said, all that the Lord hath spoken we will do. And Moses returned the words of the people unto the Lord. We'll see that this is the first time that they do this. The people of Israel, they do this again later on. Not many chapters from this, but they do it again. And the Lord said unto Moses, Lo, I come unto thee in a thick cloud, that the people may hear when I speak with thee and believe thee forever. And Moses told the words of the people unto the Lord. And the Lord said unto Moses, Go unto the people and sanctify them today and tomorrow, and let them wash their clothes. And be ready against the third day, for the third day the Lord will come down in the sight of all the people upon Mount Sinai. And thou shalt set bounds unto the people round about, saying, Take heed to yourselves, that ye go not up to the mount, or touch the border of it. Whosoever toucheth the mount shall be surely put to death. One of my theories is that because they do find some burnt, like an arena, people on the side actually said that they find this burning around this particular area as well, where the tip is, Jabal Makla. So where they find this, perhaps, just a theory, could be wrong, but perhaps one of the boundaries was God caused some kind of smoke or fire or something to come up around the bottom of it as well. Or maybe the rocks trickled down over time or something. I don't know. But you would think that they wouldn't just trickle down the entire way, that they would find some of them midway. No, in between those two, the burnt tip and the burnt bottom, there's nothing. It looks just like the rest of the mountains. So it is possible that maybe a wall of fire or something was put there. Possibly, I don't know, could be totally incorrect, but food for thought. There shall not a hand touch it, but shall surely be stoned or shot through. Pay attention to that. Stoned or shot through, whether it be beast or man, it shall not live. When the trumpet soundeth long, they shall come up to the mount, but not touch it. Don't touch the mount. Not man nor beast. And it's because they were so unclean, so that, well, upon touching it, they would be so cursed by the Lord that anyone who touched them was cursed. They couldn't touch them at all because it says that you threw stones at them, you stoned them, or you shot them through. You used an arrow or a javelin or something, and you did it from a distance. Killed them from there, on the spot, killed them. It reminds me much of how at the burning bush, Moses, take off your sandals. Take off your sandals, and because you're on holy ground. Now, all these millions of Israelites, they're not allowed to touch it. Moses is allowed to walk up and down it whenever he really likes. I mean, apparently. But just like at the burning bush, which is the same location, by the way, I believe it's very interesting how God showed him the burning bush upon this same mountain. And then he brings all of Israel around, and now they're going to see this really grandiose. The whole mountain's on fire, not just one bush, but the entire mountain's on fire. Or the peak of it is, anyway. And you see, I mean, because whenever there's millions of people, you've got to have a really grand showing in order to really put that fear into them. And man, is this ever a terrifying chapter. One of the most terrifying chapters of all books ever written. And Moses went down from the mount unto the people, and sanctified the people, and they washed their clothes. And he said unto the people, Be ready against the third day, come not at your wives. This is I believe this is the only instance in the Bible where husbands and wives are ordered not to have sex. And they're also ordered to wash their clothes. They're to have unclean clothes. Kind of sounds to me like angels, how we never do hear about how angels mate with one another. They don't marry, they don't give into marriage, but they always have these white robes on, and so God is trying to make the people very close to angels before he appears unto them. That's how holy God is, because they'd probably all die if they didn't. Just the sheer presence of God, I would say, without God doing anything, I think that God is just so pure and so holy and just so unapproachable that if you're not clean around him, then I believe just by default you die. I don't think it's necessarily has to do with God killing you. I think it's his presence. Just his mere presence is just too much to handle. You know what I'm saying? And our God's a consuming fire, which we'll see in a minute. And it came to pass on the third day, in the morning, that there were thunders and lightnings and a thick cloud upon the mount, and the voice of the trumpet exceeding loud, so that all the people that was in the camp trembled. So this is in the morning, so that everyone can see. This thick cloud comes down, real dark, thick cloud that's got thunders and lightnings and a trumpet coming from it. You can attribute all of these other qualities of this cloud, all of these other elements, thunders, lightnings, thick cloud, you can attribute all those to natural happenings, but a trumpet you can't. And this is just the intro of God. This is the heralding in of the King, of the great God. And Moses brought forth the people out of the camp to meet with God, and they stood at the nether part of the mount. Upon hearing the trumpet, the people were to come out. So it could have been they seen this cloud and witnessed it for an hour. They could have been watching this cloud just descending upon it, this thick cloud upon this mountain peak, and during the daytime, just watching this cloud come down, terrifying all of them, thunders. And we actually hear about earthquakes. There's earthquakes also occurring at this time. So this is just an all-encompassing terror. And then they hear a trumpet. It could have been an hour, could have been 2 hours, could have been 3, 4, 5 hours, for all we know, that this cloud was upon the mountain, burning it. And Mount Sinai was altogether on a smoke, because the Lord descended upon it in fire, and the smoke thereof ascended as the smoke of a furnace, and the whole mount quaked greatly. Whenever I was upon this and reading this in my studies, it really brought back what I'd studied in Daniel, which comes many, many years later. But when Daniel's praying for 21 days and he's fasting, and the angel shows up, finally, the messenger shows up, and he says, "Hey, I'm sorry I was delayed 21 days. I was on up there, and I was fighting all these other angels, these dark angels. And Michael had to come and help me to get through." But notice, whenever God says, "I'll be there in 3 days," God shows up. I bet no one, not a single demon, even came near him. Here he is coming through the dark universe, spiritually dark universe, the evil all around the earth, and he just busts right through. And you got this huge, it's the size of a mountain peak, and he comes down and just makes this completely terrifying image, right before them, visually, audibly. It just all-encompassing terror fills millions of hearts that day. Not a single person not terrified. It even says that Moses, and we'll get to this right here in a second, Moses exceedingly feared. Moses himself was very fearful of this. This was unlike what he had seen from God up until this point, I'd say. And when the voice of the trumpet sounded long and waxed louder and louder, Moses spake, and God answered him by a voice. So the trumpet was getting louder and louder and louder and louder and longer, and it was just this huge, epic entrance. You talk about an entrance. You know how they'll, blow the little horn for the kings and all that. Here comes Napoleon, doo doo doo, and all that. This this caused earthquakes. I mean, what man can know this? What man can handle this in this reality? This great creator that created us, and who can gather how magnificent his works are? Who can gather how powerful he is? It's unknown. It's completely unknown. It's unknowable, I believe. I don't even think that man can, nor angels can really gather how powerful God truly. Only God knows, truly. And the Lord came down upon Mount Sinai on the top of the mount, and the Lord called Moses up to the top of the mount, and Moses went up. I do believe that this was Christ. He was coming up to see Christ. Remember the Mount of Transfiguration, and how something very similar happened on that day. The Lord spoke, and he said, "This is my beloved Son. Hear him." And Moses and Elijah appeared there. So Moses appeared upon the Mount of Transfiguration with Christ, completely glorified, and the men, Peter, James, and John, they all fell to their faces and became terrified. And they also heard thunderings that day. So we see how, oh man, like, I mean, just the terror of this. And the Lord came down upon Mount Sinai on the top of the mount, and the Lord called Moses up to the top of the mount, and Moses went up. And the Lord said unto Moses, Go down, charge the people, lest they break through unto the Lord to gaze, and many of them perish. And let the priests also, which come near to the Lord, sanctify themselves, lest the Lord break forth upon them. And Moses said unto the Lord, The people cannot come up to Mount Sinai. Imagine the courage that Moses had to have. There is, oh my gosh, like you're walking into a place of sheer terror. And as I said before, we read how Moses was exceedingly fearful, and how he's walking up into this thick cloud. Probably took him about an hour or so to walk up it. And it's all, I mean, just darkness around him, and there's these lightnings and this thunder and earthquakes happening. And they actually said it's not a very easy walk up that mountain. The people that have went up it, during my research, I read that it's not an easy trek. To get up there, it takes proper footwear at the very least. So, but I think that God gave Moses a sense of peace once that he got in his presence. Perfect love casteth out fear. Okay. So, but man, just how terrifying that this would have been. But Moses replies, and he says, And Moses said unto the Lord, The people cannot come up to the Mount Sinai, for thou chargest us, saying, Set bounds about the mount, and sanctify it. And the Lord said unto him, Away, get thee down, and thou shalt come up, thou, and Aaron with thee. But let not the priest and the people break through to come up unto the Lord, lest he break forth upon them. No one may get the sense that the Lord was angry in reading that, and you may be justified in believing so. He says, Away, get thee down. He says, Go, hurry up, go down. But then, if you just keep reading in that verse, he says, You may come up, Moses, you and Aaron, but let everyone else stay down. Okay, so, I mean, he's still honoring Moses in this. He says, No, Moses. He says, You can come on up. So it's all in context. So Moses went down unto the people and spake unto them. Now, in closing, for all of you in whom are now thinking that God is just this terror that is just going to absolutely... A lot of atheists see God, or agnostics see God in this manner. How he's just this dictator that's there to terrify you, and how he... Now look, I'm going to end this on an extremely good note for us Christians, for the Christians. Because remember, the Israelites they were disobedient, they rebellious all the time, and their shepherd was the fallible Moses. Our shepherd is the infallible Jesus. I'm going to show you the contrast between Mount Sinai and Mount Zion, which we now come unto. Hebrews 12 says this in the New Testament for us Christians: For ye are not coming to the mount that might be touched and that burned with fire, nor unto blackness and darkness and tempest, and the sound of a trumpet and the voice of words, which voice they that heard entreated that the word should not be spoken to them any more. They didn't want to hear God speaking anymore. It terrified them, for they could not endure that which was commanded. And if so much as a beast touch the mountain, it shall be stoned, or thrust through with a dart. And so terrible was the sight, that Moses said, I exceedingly fear and quake. But ye, Christians, are coming to Mount Zion, and unto the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem, and to an innumerable company of angels. Remember, a beast couldn't even touch the mount. This right here has millions of angels, or innumerable, probably more than that, who knows. To the general assembly and church of the firstborn, which are written in heaven, and to God the judge of all, and to the spirits of just men made perfect, and to Jesus, the mediator of the new covenant, and to the blood of sprinkling, that speaketh better things than that of Abel. See that ye refuse not him that speaketh. For if they escape not who refused him that spake on earth, much more shall not we escape, if we turn away from him that speaketh from heaven. So we need not fear what they feared in Exodus 19, because we come into Mount Zion with the good Son of God, the shepherd of all, of us Christians, and that is Jesus Christ. We need not fear. Matter of fact, we are to look up and want to go there. I believe it's the exact opposite feeling for us. Rejoice, Christians. Our time is coming. In Exodus 3, whenever we first began Exodus, and Moses is on this mount and he sees the burning bush, God said this to him. And God said, Certainly I will be with thee, whenever he goes into Egypt to free the Israelites. And this shall be a token unto thee, that I have sent thee. When thou hast brought forth the people out of Egypt, ye shall serve God upon this mountain. He says, whenever you all arrive at this very same mountain, which we just read about, he says, that's whenever you'll know. I knew about this. I seen this long before you did. And so he says, I am with you, and I see what's going to happen. That is how certain of a step that you can take where I guide you. And we should have such confidence as well, that there is a heaven, that Christ did die for us, and that we have a glorious future, and that this is so minute of an existence that we live right now, it's not even to be compared with a beginning of life. Our beginning hasn't even started yet. This is just making it through an old dirty harvest, But I hope that you all learned something, y'all. And we'll try, Lord willing, to pick up in Exodus 20 tomorrow. Until then, God of all peace be with you. Amen.